Good evening. Welcome to tonight's show on CAN-TV, a live call-in show of LGBT Direct Action with Gay Liberation Network. This organization is focused on a variety of elements in the city that affect LGBT lives. This evening we'll be discussing immigration and refugee status here in the city of Chicago with someone from organized communities against deportations. I am Brent Holman Gomez. I use he and him pronouns, and I'll let our guest introduce.
Hi everybody, my name is Antonio Gutierrez with Organized Communities Against Deportation, and I use they, them, their pronouns.
So welcome to the show. We've got a variety of things we're going to discuss in addition to this evening. We have some events coming up soon that you can look for and be out in the streets to take advantage of. And we'll get to that in just a second. So the last couple of months, the U.S. government has threatened raids and deportations nationwide. And this is on top of the last decade's record deportations. And those have been carried out by the Obama administration as well as the current Trump administration. And so I wanted to talk with you today, Antonio, about kind of what differences, if any, you have heard with in the last couple of what differences you've seen in the last couple of months as the rhetoric and the talk coming out of Washington is at a much more emblazoned level. What's the difference on the ground?
Yeah, I think that as OCAR, right, we were founded in 2013 as a response to the increased deportations that we saw under the Obama administration. In 2013 alone, he deported more than 432,000 people out of our communities, and that's why OCAR was created as a response to what we were seeing. I think that any president in the United States is having to admit into the role of deporter-in-chief, but with Trump, we see that he actually embraces this. He embraces the terminology and the rhetoric of what it looks like to remove immigrants from our communities and actually using it as a platform for his election and also for his presidency at the moment itself. Another difference that we're seeing right now with Trump are the conditions of the detention centers where people are placed after they are being detained by ICE. Many of these conditions are inhumane. Many people don't have access to a shower, don't have access to actual food that is not spoiled. They don't have access to soap. And there are many other different conditions, from sleeping on the floor, from the separation of families and from their kids, that we see that is just treating undocumented immigrants in a way that is very dehumanizing and a huge violation to human rights overall itself.
Indeed. And in Chicago, have you noticed any difference in the raid activity?
Yeah, as we all know, we probably have heard, right? Chicago is a sanctuary city, and Mayor Lori Lightfoot has been very outspoken in support of immigrants in the city. But unfortunately, we as OCAD, we know that there's 4 exceptions within the Welcoming City Ordinance that provides our sanctuary status as a city. And these 4 exceptions still allow CPD, Chicago Police Department, and ICE to collaborate together on the detention and terrorization of our communities. Especially of immigrant communities, but also Black communities. For example, when we look at the gang database that the Chicago Police Department has, that is also shared with ICE, and that many of the times is not really following dual processing rights for individuals, and individuals are not notified that they are being placed into this gang database. And we see a huge issue with that. When cops, when police are able to determine that you're a gang member because of what you look like, because of what clothes you're wearing or where you're walking, we see a huge issue that eventually has a huge impact into people's lives, and that is separating families because that information is passing on to ICE, and then ICE goes and terrorizes our community by doing ICE raids. Right now as OCAD, we're working on eliminating the gang database, and we're also trying to eliminate the 4 exceptions in the Welcoming City Ordinance. And I applaud anybody that wants to learn a little bit more, to go into our website, to go onto Facebook, and learn a little bit more about what we're doing in order to eliminate these two exceptions that exist right now that are criminalizing not just immigrants, but also the Black community in the city of Chicago.
So those are the topics that we're going to get into further in our program here. First, we want to call your attention to this Tuesday, the 13th at 7 p.m., a town hall happening digitally via Facebook, and the information is there on your screen, sponsored by OCAD, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is put together by Organized Communities Against Deportation.
And also Take on Hate.
And so please, Tuesday at 7 p.m., go to facebook.com, Take on Hate.
Yes.
And that would be a further discussion of the ICE raids here in Chicago. This is a live call-in show, and the phone number is there on your screen. We invite your calls and your commentary, and we have Antonio here to be able to address any detailed questions that you have as well. Mm-hmm. So let's get into the gang database situation. So the city has these these records of people that have supposedly been involved in some type of gang activity. Talk about why it's a problem that we would be using that information.
Yes, we actually found out about the gang database, or the Chicago Police Department gang database, through a campaign that came to OCAD about 2 years ago. We found out that a person had not only been detained, but also had been violently detained in their home after an ICE raid. We allocated the family and started working with the family, as we always do. As OCAD, we put those that are directly impacted by deportations in the forefront. And in that process, after filing civil litigation to find out how ICE found this individual, Wilmer Catalan, we found out that they actually received that information from his home address from the gang database that he had been placed. And doing more litigation around that, we actually found out that the Chicago Police Department had put him in this gang database twice in rival gangs. And so the question started arriving about what are the requirements, or what are some of the things that the police is looking for in order to place an individual into this gang database, and how much it actually has any proof of that individual having any type of gang activity. After highlighting the effect that had in the family, and the fact that this person, this individual, Wilmer Catalan, spent 10 months in detention due to the misplacement of his name into this gang database, it really created a movement that now, after the elections that we saw, the mayoral elections, right, many of the candidates had to respond to what they were going to do around the gang database, because we were the group that really highlighted into the mainstream, and that now everybody in Chicago should be aware about the gang database, the issues that we have with it, and the steps that we need to take to eliminate it. I think that that's as much as we would like to see of the gang database. The Lori Lightfoot's administration is still wanting to just reform, and admits that there's issues with the gang database, but only wants to reform it and still sees it as a tool to create safety in our communities. We don't believe that the gang database creates safety in our communities. It actually is provoking terrorization in our communities, as that information is being shared with other agencies like ICE, and is being used in order to...
Deportation, not one more! 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 Today we are shutting down the street in front of ICE, and we also interrupted their offices inside, where they usually keep people who are in deportation proceedings. This is a building. This is terror in this building. Families are deported here. People are separated here. Estamos todos juntos porque sabemos lo que significa ser el target de agencias como ICE y como la policía. ICE recibe 18 billones de dólares al año del gobierno federal, y la policía recibe el 40% de los fondos de la ciudad. Aquí hoy mismo hay familias enfrentando deportación que han sido detenidos
por la colaboración de ICE y la policía, haciendo redadas en las casas de las familias.
Agentes de inmigración vestidos de policía llegaron a la puerta de mi casa con el pretexto de estar buscando a una persona que quizás esa persona no existe. Los agentes entraron a mi casa y con sus armas apuntando para todas partes, buscando en todos los cuartos y sin importar a quién encontraban. En ese entonces estaba mi esposa y mi hijo y 2 miembros de la familia. Después ellos me dijeron que yo estaba bajo arresto. En ese momento ellos me llevaron y me detuvieron por una semana. Gracias a Dios y a la comunidad organizada yo pude salir.
¡Deportación! ¡Y una más! ¡Deportación!
So this is some of the street action that GLN fully embraces as being the way that we create change in our politics and in our society, and we were glad to show that that was one of the protests that OCAD has organized that stop traffic on Congress and is an inconvenience to all people in Chicago, because change needs to occur, because this man that was in this video was detained for a week and probably had trouble paying rent during that month. And so these are all of the things that GLN recognizes, is that the terror of this government that we have here in Chicago, not just on a federal level, but right here in Chicago, is a very real and present thing. And I think we're about ready to show another video just from a couple of weeks ago of the large protest July 13th in downtown Chicago that was put on by many groups and had tens of thousands of people there. That will be coming up on your screen soon. These demonstrations have been going on, particularly around immigration in Chicago, for 15 years or so. And as we were talking about earlier, the city of Chicago is complicit in this activity by the federal government, by sharing the gang databases and sharing other information with ICE, the customs enforcement about immigrants that are under arrest currently in their jails here in Chicago. And so this is very much a local problem. I just want to point out when we were talking about the gang database, Mayor Lightfoot, who ran on this reform candidacy that she was going to change things with the police and with the police engagement with our communities. And on this day of this protest that we just watched here on July 13th, when she was asked by activists to state that they would stop sharing the gang databases with ICE, her response was to deflect the message about that there's 8 different databases and all of them need to be, inspected and improved and all this stuff, which just deflects the conversation. The thing is that the real issue is that we need to stop feeding our community residents to the federal government's enforcement. You mentioned that there's other exceptions to the Welcoming City Ordinance. What are those?
Yeah, so there's 4 exceptions that are based on criminalization of the immigrant community. One of them is if somebody has committed a felony, they can be turned into ICE regardless of whether that felony happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whether somebody has an outstanding warrant, whether they are placed in the gang database, or whether they have committed or they've been not yet convicted, but they have committed a serious crime of moral multitude, and they can also be put into these exceptions or be transferred into ICE if they come into contact with ICE custody. I myself have a DUI from 2011 that has prevented me from obtaining DACA, and that has put me at risk even now because of these 4 exceptions, that if I come into any contact with local police enforcement, I could also be put into deportation proceedings and be transferred into ICE custody. And this is the importance of what we're talking about as OCAD, right? That many of the times, Mayor Lori Lightfoot and City Council, they keep claiming that they want to work on these things and they keep giving us delays. And I understand that Mayor Lori Lightfoot will never come to understand what it means to feel threat and fear that ICE might come into your door and knock. But I hope that she understands that many of her constituents in the city of Chicago have that fear, and that we as OCAD, as the Albany Park Defense Network, as La Villita Se Defiende, have actually seen an increase of race in this city. These races are not stopping just because we are naming our city a sanctuary city. Just yesterday, we have confirmed the presence of ICE. After they came to one of the restaurants, one of the local restaurants, they went and knocked on people's doors in Little Village, expecting for just one person to open, and not just detain individuals that don't have a criminal record, but also arrest any collateral individuals that are going to be there. And we see this all across the nation, right? When we talk about the massive raid that just happened in Mississippi 2 days ago, that 680 families are not separated, that's a big issue that we need to address as a nation. And if we don't do it right now, unfortunately, we're only probably going to look back into this moment with guilt and remorse, because the conditions of these detention centers, especially the ones at the borders, are facilities that really resemble and mimic a lot of the detention centers and concentration camps that we saw during the Holocaust. And this is the moment for us to act, or for us to be decisive, that we're going to have to look back into this moment with that guilt and remorse as a society, because we are allowing this to happen.
This country does have a history of creating concentration camps for the Japanese during World War II, where 120,000 people of Japanese origin were taken out of their homes, removed from their businesses. They lost their property, they lost their incomes, and placed for years in jails. Prisons, open-air prisons throughout the West and Midwest of this country. So they are active. There's actually quite a few Japanese heritage groups that are active in the struggle to stop these detention centers, because they see history repeating itself of families being detained, children being separated from their families, and so OCAD actually has some actions going on right now around the detention centers, and Francisco and Jesus?
Yes, so we currently are working on 2 public campaigns. One of them is for a queer person named Francisco. The other one is Jesus, who is actually a brother of one of the OCAD organizers. Both individuals are placed in detention centers outside the state of Illinois, and we're asking them for their release. Francisco actually has been granted asylum, but ICE is currently appealing that decision, and during that appeal process, he's still in detention, not receiving the proper medical care that he needs, and sometimes, many of the times, finding himself in solitary confinement for organizing or trying to organize other detainees in that detention center. For Jesus, he is a DACA recipient that needs to be allowed to renew his DACA and to be able to be released in order to do so, because ICE has constantly policies that are always preventing and making sure that people are put into detentions indefinitely. And this is, of course, because many of the detention centers are actually privatized. And so you see the profit of how companies are profiting out of the detention of many of the immigrant communities, and how we are allowing that to happen itself as part of our society, and what the issue that we see here in immigration overall.
In the specific cases of Francisco and Jesus, you can get more information on Organized Communities Against Deportation's Facebook page.
Yes.
So facebook.com, Organized Communities Against Deportation. This is their website as well. So Organized Communities has a town hall coming up on Tuesday at 7 p.m. that we want to remind you about. That's at the Facebook page Take on Hate. And that information is on your screen. Is there anything that you want to say about that?
No, I think that if you want to know a little bit more about how you can support, how you can be an ally to the ICE race that is happening right now in the city of Chicago and across the Chicagoland area, you should watch this, because there's going to be a lot of conversations around what allies, what any individual can do, from like knowing your rights, and also how to document when you see any like police or ICE activity in your neighborhood, and making sure that you're protecting one another as neighbors.
Yeah. In June, when some of these like raids were announced that they were going to happen this weekend, they were supposedly canceled. And one of the reasons was that Chicago was so well prepared. So tell us more about what is being prepared. Why was Chicago considered prepared?
Yeah, I think that when we look at Chicago, right, the rhetoric is around the sanctuary city, and that prevents race from happening in the city, as I just talked about and gave examples of it, right? That is not true. But the preparation has really come from communities being organized. There are a couple of defense networks and raid response like groups that have come out of the necessity of the ICE raids increasing into our communities. The Albany Park Defense Network, where is the community that I live, and I still support the defense network. La Villita Se Defiende. We're constantly aware, and as OCAD, we answer the hotline or the family support line with ICER in order to know what ICE activity people are reporting. And usually what we do is that we try to get individuals to kind of confirm the information, and then if the information is confirmed, to report it, to make sure that we are telling the community at large about what's going on, but also documenting the instances that were occurring and that we're seeing, because nobody else is talking about them, right? The mainstream is not talking about the ICE raids that are happening. Just in Albany Park, 3 weeks ago, an Albany Park Defense Network member had ICE come to her door and knock like for 30 minutes while she hid herself in her room with her like 2-year-old boy, right? These are the instances that we're hearing about. Yesterday with the ICE activity or ICE presence at Little Village, people are afraid to go outside, and I don't blame them for doing that, right? As an undocumented person, I understand what the fear looks like, but it's enough to we should not allow that fear from stopping us from organizing and for being in the streets to demand the humanity and the respect that we deserve, regardless of our immigration status.
And there are Know Your Rights literature that you can grab. I've seen it posted on businesses in my neighborhood. Some aldermen are sending it out to people in their neighborhood as well. And those include the rights are, do not answer the door to an ICE officer. You are only compelled to open the door if they have a warrant for you, for a person that's actually there in the household. So you can hold them at bay. There are other aspects of your rights that can be found at places like the website for organized communities against deportation that is on your screen right now. Again, we want to remind you to participate this Tuesday in the town hall that will be happening on Facebook at Take on Hate, where you can learn more about your individual rights. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Antonio.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you. We look forward to seeing you all in the streets.
Yes, and let's not forget to abolish ICE, because that's really what we need to do, right? It's enough to work on ordinance and changes in policy, but what we really need to do is go at the root of the issue, and that is to abolish ICE overall.